Rome burned, and he played the fiddle, or so history tells us. The man at the center of the flames was more than just a tyrant. He was an artist, a showman, a god in his own mind. His name was Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, the last emperor of the Julio-Claudian line, and possibly the most infamous ruler in Roman history. But beneath the legends of cruelty, decadence, and madness lies a far darker truth. Nero didn't just burn Rome. He burned humanity itself, one life, one betrayal, one twisted act at a time. This is the story of the emperor who believed he was divine, who fed on fear, pleasure, and flesh alike, and whose hunger knew no limits. The Roman Empire had never seen anyone quite like Nero. When he ascended to the throne in 54 AD at just 16 years old, the city hailed him as a golden child, a new dawn after the grim reign of his stepfather, Emperor Claudius. But even from the beginning, Nero's path was drenched in manipulation and deceit. Behind the boy emperor stood a woman of terrifying ambition, his mother, Agrippina the Younger, sister of the infamous Caligula, niece of Emperor Claudius, and descendant of Augustus himself. Agrippina had Rome in her blood and power in her bones. She was the architect of Nero's rise. Claudius had an older son, Britannicus, but Agrippina made sure Nero, her son from a previous marriage, would inherit the throne. She seduced Claudius, married him, and persuaded him to adopt Nero. Soon after, Claudius mysteriously died after eating poison mushrooms. Some said Agrippina's hand was behind it. Others said Nero knew nothing. But what's certain is that the moment Claudius was gone, Nero was crowned emperor and Agrippina became the real power behind the throne. At first, Rome rejoiced. The young emperor seemed promising. Guided by the philosopher Seneca and the general Burrus, Nero promised peace, prosperity, and justice. He spoke softly, smiled often, and distributed gifts to the poor. He even ended certain brutal gladiatorial practices, claiming he wanted to be remembered as a bringer of beauty, not blood. But beauty, in Nero's eyes, had a cost. As months passed, Agrippina began to demand more control. She wanted her throne beside his, her image on Roman coins, her approval stamped on every decree. She had built Nero's empire, and she intended to rule it. But Nero had other desires: music, art, poetry, and most dangerously, Poppaea Sabina, a woman known for her beauty and ambition. Agrippina despised her, and soon the emperor and his mother were at war. It began with whispers. Nero started to avoid her. Her guards were reassigned. Her influence waned. Finally, he tried to have her removed from the palace entirely. Agrippina retaliated with the only weapon she had left: secrets. She began to remind everyone that Nero was not the rightful heir, that Claudius's true son, Britannicus, was still alive. Days later, during a banquet, Britannicus began to convulse after drinking his wine. He collapsed to the floor, eyes rolling back, foam at his lips. Nero sat quietly, watching. Britannicus was declared dead before dawn. The boy's death shocked Rome. The people murmured, but Nero laughed. He told them it was just an unfortunate illness. And when the whispers reached Agrippina's ears, she knew the truth. Her son no longer needed her. She was next. The murder of Agrippina became one of the most infamous crimes in ancient history. Nero planned it like theater. He invited his mother to a coastal villa under the guise of reconciliation and gifted her a magnificent ship designed to collapse at sea. When the vessel broke apart, Agrippina swam to shore, dripping with blood and seawater, but alive. Nero panicked. He sent soldiers to assist her, claiming they feared she might harm herself. When they arrived, she understood her fate. "Strike my womb," she said, "the womb that bore such a monster." They did. Rome was silent when her death was announced. Nero claimed it was suicide, but no one believed him. From that moment, the emperor's mask began to slip. Without his mother, Nero was free to indulge every impulse, every appetite. He filled the palace with performers, poets, and dancers. He took to the stage himself, performing tragedies while the Senate watched in horror. In Rome, acting was the work of slaves and foreigners. But Nero believed himself an artist of divine talent. He forced nobles to applaud as he played the lyre, sang of gods and heroes, and wept on command. The philosopher Seneca tried to restrain him, but even wisdom was powerless against obsession. Nero's reign became a carnival of decadence and paranoia. Anyone who displeased him vanished. Friends, tutors, generals, none were safe. Then came Poppaea Sabina. She was everything Nero wanted: beauty, ambition, and cruelty wrapped in perfume and silk. But there was a problem. Nero was already married to Octavia, the beloved daughter of Claudius. Poppaea wanted her gone, so she whispered poison into the emperor's ear. Octavia was accused of adultery, an unthinkable crime for an empress. She was exiled, then executed. Her head was sent to Poppaea as proof. Not long after, Nero married Poppaea in a lavish ceremony. But happiness never lasts in a house built on blood. It's said that Poppaea died at Nero's hand, kicked to death during a fit of rage while pregnant with his child. Others say she died in childbirth. But even Nero's grief was monstrous. He declared her a goddess, embalmed her body in spices, and refused to burn her remains. He ordered her statue placed in temples beside Venus herself. Then, as if to fill the void, Nero began to rebuild his world into a stage, one grand enough to hold his delusions of immortality. In 64 AD, the sky above Rome glowed red. The fire started near the Circus Maximus and raged for 6 days. The flames devoured entire districts, temples, markets, homes. Tens of thousands fled into the countryside as smoke turned the sun black. When the ashes settled, most of the city was gone. And in the ruins, the whispers began. Nero had ordered the fire himself. Some said he wanted to clear space for his new palace, a golden city worthy of a god. Others claimed he watched from his balcony as the city burned, singing of Troy's destruction while playing his lyre. The truth? No one knows. But the perception was enough to destroy what little love the people still had for him. To save himself, Nero needed someone to blame, and he found them, the Christians. They were a small, secretive sect, already distrusted by many Romans. Nero accused them of arson, treason, and hatred of mankind. What followed was one of the first state-sponsored persecutions in history. Men and women were crucified, burned alive, and torn apart by wild beasts in Nero's gardens. Some were coated in oil and set alight to illuminate his parties. The emperor rode through the spectacle in a chariot, basking in their screams. It wasn't justice. It was theater. By now, even his allies feared him. The Senate bowed, but their loyalty was fear alone. Nero believed himself untouchable, beloved by the gods, adored by the masses, chosen to rule not through politics, but performance. He built the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a palace so vast it covered half the city. Its walls glittered with jewels, its ceilings shimmered with gold leaf. At its heart stood a colossal statue of Nero himself, taller than any temple, arms spread as though to embrace the empire. When asked if he thought his extravagance excessive, Nero simply smiled. At last, he said, "I can live like a human being." But paranoia is a loyal companion to power. Nero began to see conspiracies everywhere. In 65 AD, a plot against him was uncovered. The Pisonian conspiracy, a network of senators and generals who planned to overthrow the emperor. Nero's response was swift and merciless. Dozens were executed. Others were ordered to commit suicide, including his former mentor, Seneca. Seneca's death was a masterpiece of Stoic tragedy. The philosopher calmly slit his wrists and spoke words of wisdom as his lifeblood drained away, trying to die with dignity in a world ruled by madness. But Nero's madness was just beginning to consume him. He began to dream of gods and monsters, believing himself descended from Apollo and Dionysus. He held competitions where no one dared to win against him. He traveled to Greece to perform in public theaters, forcing entire cities to declare him victor. He wasn't an emperor anymore. He was an artist with absolute power, and the world was his audience. Yet even Rome has limits. The army, once his strongest pillar, began to rebel. Provinces rose in defiance. Governors declared independence. When word reached Nero that his legions had abandoned him, he laughed. "The people still love me," he said. "They will come to my defense." They didn't. The Senate declared him a public enemy. As soldiers closed in, Nero fled the city with only a few servants. For the first time in his life, he was powerless. No gold, no army, no applause. He hid in a villa outside Rome, trembling. When he heard the hoofbeats of approaching riders, he realized his reign was over. "It is too late," he whispered. "This is the end." His companions urged him to take his own life before he was captured. But Nero couldn't do it. He wept, shaking, begging for courage. Finally, with a soldier's help, he pressed a dagger to his throat. As the blade pierced his flesh, he gasped, "Qualis artifex perio." What an artist dies in me. Nero was 30 years old. His empire rejoiced, but his legend was just beginning. In the years that followed, stories of his depravity multiplied. He was accused of every sin imaginable: murder, incest, cannibalism. Some accounts claimed he feasted on his victims, consuming the flesh of his enemies in twisted rituals of domination. Whether true or not, the rumors became part of his mythology. Nero the monster, the emperor who ate his enemies. For centuries, Christians painted him as the Antichrist. Poets turned him into a symbol of tyranny. Artists depicted him as the embodiment of Rome's decay. Even when new emperors rose, his name remained a curse. But here's the paradox. The same man who destroyed so much also inspired Rome's golden age of art and architecture. His extravagance bankrupted the empire, but his taste transformed it. The theaters, statues, and villas he commissioned became blueprints for generations to come. He was a monster, but a visionary one. In the ruins of the Golden House, archaeologists have uncovered frescoes depicting mythological feasts, gods devouring mortals, mortals offering themselves to gods. The boundary between consumption and worship was blurred, just as it was in Nero's mind. Perhaps that's the real horror of his reign. Not that he killed, not that he burned, but that he believed every act, no matter how vile, was a work of art. When he executed senators, he called it trimming the garden. When he watched Christians burn, he called it illumination. When he destroyed his own city, he called it renewal. For Nero, cruelty was creation. Madness was performance. Humanity was the canvas. After his death, impostors appeared. Men claiming to be the emperor returned from exile. The myth of Nero refused to die. Some Romans even believed he would come back to reclaim his throne. They called it Nero Redivivus, the prophecy of the risen tyrant. It said that years later, travelers in the East told tales of a singer king who wandered the deserts of Parthia, wearing a crown of laurel leaves and speaking in riddles. History says Nero died by his own hand. But myths say the artist simply took his final bow, and the world, his eternal stage, never stopped echoing his name. The story of Nero isn't just a tale of insanity. It's a mirror held up to power itself. What happens when ambition devours empathy, when performance replaces leadership, when a man begins to believe his desires are divine law? Every tyrant, since, has followed his script in some form. They destroy and justify it as creation. They burn and call it renewal. They kill and call it art. And maybe that's why Nero still fascinates us. Because buried somewhere in his madness is the question every empire must ask. When does civilization stop being a masterpiece and start being a feast? When does the artist become the monster? And when the fire starts, who among us will be left watching, thinking it's only a performance?